How do you build a thriving empire in a deadly desert without a single river?
From the sky, they look like the scars of ancient meteor strikes, a line of mysterious craters stretching across the wasteland.
But these are not scars. They are breathing holes, portals to a world hidden deep beneath the burning sand.
3,000 years ago, ancient Persian engineers did the impossible. They went underground to hunt for water.
Armed with nothing but hand tools and a profound understanding of geology, they carved thousands of miles of tunnels by hand.
Every stone, every handful of earth had to be hauled to the surface through vertical shafts, creating the craters we see from the sky.
They dug deep into the foothills until they struck the mother well, the hidden aquifer where the mountain stored its winter snowmelt. But finding water was only half the battle. They had to guide it across the desert without letting a single drop evaporate. They calculated a slope so precise, so gentle, that the water would flow for dozens of miles without eroding the tunnel walls.
This system, known as the Qanat, was a masterpiece of ancient physics. A gravity-fed water highway hidden from the sun.
When the water finally emerged into the cities, it brought life to the dead earth. It didn't just provide drinking water, it cooled the very air. The Qanats transformed barren wastelands into flourishing empires. They were the invisible arteries of Persian civilization.
No pumps, no machines, just gravity, human endurance, and a profound respect for the movement of nature. This is the story of the men who conquered the desert by hiding from it. Ancient wisdom.
But the Persians didn't just master the earth. Once the water reached the city, they had to master the sky.
These towering structures were called badgers, or wind catchers. Long before electricity, they were
The wind catcher was designed to capture even the slightest breeze from any direction and force it downward, deep into the heart of the building.
As the hot desert air rushed down the shaft, it passed directly over the freezing underground Qanat water.
The water absorbed the heat. The air was instantly chilled and pushed into the living.
This mastery of thermodynamics led to something even more impossible: the creation of ice in the middle of a burning desert.
They built yakhchals, ancient ice houses. During the freezing desert winter nights, By morning, the sharp drop in temperature had frozen the water solid. Before the sun could rise, workers harvested the ice and stored it deep inside the insulated dome, burying it under protective layers of straw. Thanks to the thick mud brick insulation and the wind catchers pulling cold air down, the ice survived the brutal summer months.
But this paradise of ice and water came at a terrifying cost. The Qanats demanded blood.
The men who dug these tunnels were called the Muqani. Their work was so dangerous that they wore white garments. Working hundreds of feet underground, they faced cave-ins, toxic gases, and sudden, violent flash floods from the aquifers.
The knowledge was fiercely guarded, passed down exclusively from father to son. They didn't use blueprints.
A master Muqani could sense the desert floor so precisely that he knew where the hidden water lay and how far down to dig.
Where the earth was soft and prone to collapse, they baked custom clay rings, lining the tunnels to ensure the water would flow for millennia. Their sacrifice was the foundation of an entire civilization. Every fruit grown, every block of ice carved, and
once the water reached the surface, a new impossible challenge began. How do you divide a single river of water among thousands of thirsty people?
The answer was the Mirab, the master of water. His job was not just engineering, it was absolute justice.
To distribute the water fairly, they invented one of the most accurate timekeeping devices in the ancient world, the clepsydra, or water clock.
A brass bowl with a mathematically calculated hole. When it sank, a specific unit of time had passed.
There was no chaos, no hoarding. The Qanat system forced the entire empire to operate.
Every drop was accounted for. Water was not a right, it was a carefully measured currency that bound the community together.
The wealthy citizens of the empire didn't just bring the water to their homes, They built their homes down into the water. They constructed the payab, subterranean living spaces built directly over the underground Qanat stream. While the desert above burned at inescapable temperatures, families retreated deep underground to eat. The Qanat didn't just keep the empire alive. It dictated their architecture, their daily schedules, and the very layout of their cities. For the public, massive stepped wells reached deep into the earth. The deeper you went, the purer and colder the water became.
In a landscape designed to kill you, this underground water was nothing short of a miracle.
When this hidden water was finally allowed to flourish on the surface, it created something that changed human language forever.
The Persians used the Qanat to design geometric walled gardens. A perfect, symmetrical oasis.
Inside these walls, they grew pomegranates, figs, and blooming roses. The air was thick with humidity and heavy with sweet scents.
They called this walled garden Paradisa, a word meaning an enclosed sanctuary.
When other civilizations saw these impossible green jewels in the desert, they adopted the word.
Paradisa became the origin of the word paradise, and paradise was entirely engineered by human hands, fed by water stolen from the dark.
But paradise required eternal vigilance. The Qanats were living systems, and without constant care, they would suffocate.
Year after year, century after century, the diggers had to return to the dark. The earth was always trying to reclaim the space. A neglected Qanat would collapse within a generation, taking the city above down with it.
Kings died, empires were conquered, but the water had to keep flowing. The maintenance of the Qanat superseded politics and war.
This reliance bred a profound spiritual reverence. In the ancient Zoroastrian religion of Persia, water was sacred. The earth was sacred. The Qanat was the ultimate physical manifestation of respecting both.
It was an agricultural system that demanded multi-generational thinking. You did not dig a Qanat for yourself. You dug it for your grandchildren. And you maintained it for the ancestors who bled in the dark to start it. It was a testament to a civilization that understood that they were not masters of the earth, but mere stewards of its hidden currents. This engineered abundance didn't just feed the Persians. It fueled the greatest trade route in human history, the Silk Road.
Without the Qanats, crossing the Iranian plateau would have been a death sentence for merchants moving between east and west.
The water highways dictated the map of global trade. Cities grew exactly where the water emerged from the earth.
In these Qanat-fed oases, global cultures collided. The underground water became the literal currency of international commerce.
A merchant could travel for weeks through total devastation, knowing exactly where the next hidden artery of water lay waiting. Aegeans. With physical survival guaranteed by the water, the civilization had the luxury to look up.
The Qanats watered the roots of the Islamic Golden Age, preserving and expanding human knowledge while Europe was in the Dark Ages.
Every philosopher, every poet, and every merchant who passed through owed their life to the men digging in the dark.
But creating this network required mathematical genius. How do you dig a perfectly straight line underground for 40 miles without modern instruments?
The Persian engineers used nothing but a plumb bob, a wooden triangle, and the stars to calculate the exact gradient of the slope. If the tunnel was too steep, the rushing water would erode the walls and collapse the entire system.
If the tunnel was too flat, the water would stagnate, losing its pressure and evaporating into the dry earth.
The margin of error was measured in millimeters over a distance of dozens of miles. A feat of invisible geometry.
When they hit impenetrable bedrock, they couldn't just use explosives. They had to use fire.
They would light massive fires against the stone face, wait for it to heat, and then violently cool it with cold water, causing the rock to crack.
It was a slow, agonizing crawl through the Earth's crust. Some Qanats took multiple generations to complete.
Incredibly, multiple teams digging from opposite ends would perfectly meet in the middle, deep in the absolute darkness.
This required a three-dimensional understanding of geology that baffled even Roman engineers centuries later.
When the final barrier was broken and the mother well was released, the water would flow uninterrupted for centuries.
It wasn't just digging a hole. It was performing open-heart surgery on the desert itself.
For 3,000 years, the system worked in perfect harmony with nature. But the modern world brought a brutal new philosophy. We stopped listening to the earth. Instead of coaxing water out with gravity, we used diesel and electricity to rip it from the aquifers.
The deep wells and massive pumps began to drain the water table faster than the mountain snow could replenish it.
The mother wells dried up. The water level fell below the ancient tunnels. For the first time in millennia, the underground rivers stopped flowing.
Without the Qanats, the oasis died. The wind catchers pulled in nothing but dust. But the story of the Qanat is not just a tragedy. It is a warning.
Famissers. Broerberdlots heels futsukprulwer. As modern cities faves and drain heat wickfers, gurukfrulering, architects are look windcatcher.
They are realizing that true technological advancement doesn't always mean conquering nature with brute force. Sometimes, genius looks like harmony.
The Qanats teach us that water is not just a resource to be extracted. It is a living force that must be respected, guided, and balanced.
How do you build an empire in the desert? You don't fight the earth. You learn to listen to it. The underground rivers are waiting. We only need to remember how to hear them.